Coming in today, my guest is Chris Renaud. Am I saying that correctly?
That's it.
All right. He's producer, director, designer, artist, creator. He's got over 25 producer credits, 11 credits as an actor, 8 credits as a director on IMDb. Also creator of some of the most iconic current pop culture icon characters in the Minions. Gru from Despicable Me as well as one of yours, I believe.
Well, I mean,
Or
I
is
can,
it
I can get into the story a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I would.
collaboration?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little. It was an interesting. The way the film started was a guy named Sergio Pablos, who was a Disney animator, had pitched an idea of a supervillain or a villain that needed to adopt 3 little girls to for his plans.
Right.
And actually, Sergio had some great ideas in that pitch. He had depicted Gru kind of as Count Dracula, a little bit, like very gothic. And as we were developing the movie, we started talking about the idea that Gru lived in more of a James Bond type world. So that was kind of but really we had a very strong story and character idea from Sergio's pitch. And again, we started building certain things like design ideas. I had a directing partner named Pierre Coffin, and there was a character designer, production designer, art director named Eric Guillaume, who was also very formative in a lot of these early creative decisions, along with the producer, Chris Meledandri. So in this movie, like a lot of animated things, it was, really a collaborative process as we kind of developed the idea, sort of incrementally. Gru, the initial thing, as I said, he looked like Dracula. Then he kind of looked very tall and thin and severe with this kind of like black bowl haircut, which we decided was just had no vulnerability, no appeal really. And so we sort of nudged him towards Uncle Fester in the Addams Family. And the Addams Family cartoon, comic strip, I should say, was very formative kind of in the thinking of developing the world as well. And then we talked to Steve Carell, and who had been cast as a voice actor, and we were like, maybe we made him too vulnerable because he actually was kind of short, bald, heavy set, and so we kept the bald thing, and the face remained exactly the same, but we kind of made him taller and more like a upside down V. And Eric added the scarf, for that European flair, and that became the character. So it was very kind of developed over time. And of course, and not a lot of time, but I mean, I don't know, 6 months to a year as we're in pre-production. And of course, when you add the actor's voice, that sort of takes it a direction as well.
Well, I was going to ask that. How does the actor's portrayal, or do they have ideas that influence that design?
Well, when we first met with Steve, we talked about the idea of doing a voice, which he was super into. When I say a voice, I mean like an accent. One of our, a couple of things that we were talking about on our side were Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, and Peter Sellers. I mean, Peter Sellers, pretty much, everything he did from, after the Fox, where he was Italian, of course, Clouseau, the most famous, as the French accent, always kind of brought this kind of strange character voice, to anything he did. And Steve was great at that. And that was sort of what he was thinking as well. So we tried a few ideas. We tried a kind of a Spanish thing. And then we very quickly went to this it's kind of everywhere and nowhere, right? I mean, it's like this Eastern European idea, which was also came a little bit out of the design work we were doing, particularly Eric Guillaume, the designer I mentioned, hit on this idea of Gru and his world looking like Soviet era, metal with rivets, and so it all kind of worked together. You start to find the direction. And then we counterpointed that with Vector, the bad guy in that one, to make him look like the Mac store. Everything was white plastic, and just these kind of modern, because he was kind of a young upstart versus the more established villain who's, having some financial trouble. So from there, developing the story, we were having trouble in the script because they were globe-trotting, stealing different landmarks. And I pitched the idea of stealing the moon because it was just kind of a big, silly, romantic idea. And, everybody liked it. And that became sort of the narrative plot In addition, I'd thrown out the shrink ray that Vector had as the means to an end. So that's kind of the MacGuffin that gets you to the big goal. And then of course the film itself is really, which it was present in the original pitch, is about, you know, the choice we all make of career versus family. And that's Gru's decision at the end, is going to the dance recital or finishing to steal his, you know, mission of stealing the moon.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you know, how it developed from that original pitch. And the other big element, of course, was the minions. In the original pitch, they were brutes. You know, I mean, they were kind of like a motley crew of, you know, henchmen, really.
Yeah.
And what we talked about, the other director and I, Pierre, about the idea that one of the challenges with the movie was that because Gru is a villain, I know we love Darth Vader, but we love Darth Vader in juxtaposed with Luke. If you're making a movie about Darth Vader, it gets a little trickier because you want the audience to latch on to him. And with a villain, you know, we had some issues when we were first doing some test screenings. You know, you can very easily go down the wrong path and people are like, I don't like him. And they'll shut down from the character for, you know, 10 minutes. You know, I'm sure you've been to a film and you come out and you're like, I didn't care about anybody in that. Or I didn't like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one of the ways we talked about giving him appeal was that his henchmen were idiots, and not just idiots, but were like children. And so, and they love him. And so their love of Gru makes the audience love him. You know what I mean? So it's like you see a dad with his kid and he's like, you know, and Gru, you know, Carell had done this thing where he was calling out names like Dave, Carl, and we use that. And in their evolution, a lot of what we talked about, just to bring it all the way around, was Star Wars. You know, obviously George Lucas loves putting little people, whether Huguenots or Jawas or R2-D2, and there's an appeal to that. Again, it's the childlike thing.
Right.
Of course, some of the Jawas were actually cast as children. So yeah, with the minions, you know, we started in some of my very first storyboards. They were actually robotic. They were they kind of looked like R2-D2, but with arms. And then we were talking about it. Eric Guillaume, the designer, had done some shorter guys, but they were humans. And then I was talking to Pierre on the phone, and he said, well, maybe they shouldn't be robots because we want something that we'll have more empathy for. And so I said, well, what about mole people? And I was thinking of the Marvel comic of Mole Man. He used to have all these little dudes running around, and they were more humanoid in their form. And so Pierre's like, well, I don't know what a Mole Man is. And so I did a couple of sketches with goggles. I'd already designed Dr. Nefario, who had goggles. I love goggles. And they were kind of ugly, a little bit more monstery, a little bit, but they were short and had goggles, you know, and 3-fingered hands and stuff. And I sent those to Pierre and Eric Guillaume, and then Eric did the design based off, you know, our discussions and those thoughts as you see it. And then we kind of were developing it, you know, with the storyboard artists and just sort of creating their personality. You know, I was a storyboard artist. I did a lot of storyboards and for the first film. You know, we would do things like having the minions go fight, fight, fight. You know, just that they always, again, like kids, they easily get distracted from the task at hand. And then that sort of became their defining characteristic. And then again, with the Star Wars thing, Pierre did a vocal test after he and I talked about Ben Burtt's work with the Jawas and R2-D2 and being able to get emotion out of nothing, you know, and that was kind of like, you know, how then the language started to be developed. And of course, the characters now speak a lot. In the first film, if you really watch it, they don't say a lot. They have little words here and there, but a lot of laughing and stuff like that. But again, you know, so those characters, some of those ideas were, you know, were really influenced by, you know, certainly my love of Star Wars and the other filmmakers as well.
That's funny. How did the overalls come into it?
The overalls were sort of two things. One was we had this sketch from Eric Guillaume, and he had done these human guys wearing overalls. And so I remembered that, and I put it on my sketch of my mole people. And then the other thing I was thinking about was Dr. No, where, do you remember they were always in Bond movies, they were wearing coveralls, you know, like the guy, or Moonraker.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, Moonraker too. They always had the kind of same, you know, they just had a uniform. And so that was basically how that started, those two
I
ideas.
never really thought about that, but yeah, you're right. I
Yeah.
haven't seen Moonraker in a long time. Was that the first appearance of Jaws?
Yes. It is.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And Jaws is actually sort of the classic example of how the henchmen were sort of depicted in the original pitch, you know,
Right.
like just a brute, you know what I mean? Like, even though he became kind
Frankenstein
of
kind of guy.
yeah, even though he became kind of a comedic character over time,
Right.
initially he was quite scary in that movie anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, the first one he was in, he got silly in that one. The first one he was in is Spy Who Loved Me.
Okay.
Because remember they're in the desert and everything. I think that in Moonraker is where he had a girlfriend.
Oh my God.
That was where it went off the rails a little.
Yeah, I've seen pretty much all the Bond movies at some point, but I don't remember which ones are which now. I have to go back and watch them.
Yeah.
I
That
think
was right in the sweet spot for me because I really remember Roger Moore. That was, I think, the first one I saw in the theater was Live and Let Die, and then
I
Spy Who
saw
Loved
that
Me.
in the theater, and funny enough, the last one I saw in the theater until Goldeneye was the one where Sean Connery blows up the girl with a grenade and just her boots are left. I can't remember which one that is.
Oh, geez. I don't remember either. I know there's so many.
Never Say Never Again. I don't know which one it was, but
Oh,
anyway.
maybe. That might have been. Was that Kim Basinger in it? Because
I
she
don't
was
remember.
Never Say
It
Never
was
Again.
just the last Sean Connery one. But he did
Okay.
it after Roger Moore had done it.
Yes, well, that's got to be Never Say Never Again.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the one he came back for.
Yeah.
Briefly, yeah.
So I saw that in the theater. That's the lasting memory is that is the boots just left after he
right.
up or something.
Yeah.
But so yeah, well, obviously, so how did this start? How did you start getting props and replicas and stuff? Have you ever gotten screen use props, or did you?
Well, I don't have any. Well, yeah, so it's sort of a little bit of a story. I mean, like anybody. I mean, my holy grail when I was a kid was the Stormtrooper helmet, and I think a lot of people that's their thing that they started thinking about, because I remember, and the first one I got was the Don Post one, and I remember getting it as a kid. And it was kind of a misshapen lump of vinyl. It's sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but
they're pretty horrible looking.
It's not screen accurate. And so I was kind of inside a little bit devastated when I opened it up, because I remember I had bought it out of I mailed in a coupon. This is the old days, right? Out of the back of a Famous Monsters magazine newsprint called Star Wars Spectacular. And back in those days, I saw the film in '77 in the theater. There wasn't anything available. Like this magazine I bought at like a candy store, literally on the corner. And that was it. I mean, I bought it because it was the only thing that was available. Right. So anyway, in the back, it had a coupon. It had an ad for some products, including 4 masks, which I know now are Don Post masks. Right? It's C-3PO, Vader, Stormtrooper, and Chewbacca. Now, what got me really excited as a little kid was the only one that was a photograph of an actual helmet sitting on a table was the Stormtrooper. The other 3 were production stills. So I'm thinking, well, that's it. That's what I'm getting. You know what I mean? And it was the hero version of the helmet. And so I sent off for it, and it was expensive. It was like $35, none of which my parents would give me. So I think I saved probably close to 6 months my allowance over time and over Christmas, whatever I got,
Yeah.
And then, and of course, in those days, things took 8 weeks. I'm giving you my whole history here. At least 8 weeks to show up. And I remember this kid had a Starlog, which was a magazine back then, and there was a different ad with the helmets in it, and it had this picture of that Don Post mask. And he goes, "Oh, this must be the one you're getting." And I was like, "Nah, it can't be. I'm getting the real deal." So then it's an early lesson in childhood disappointment, right? And so then the box shows up, and I open it up, and sure enough, it's exactly the one that had been in his magazine.
Oh my God.
So that was always, so over the years, I would, then Don, I kind of dropped out of it because I was, in college and getting out of school. But then Don Post did another release I can't remember exactly when, but they did this like premiere release of fiberglass helmets. And I'd gone to a couple of conventions. At that time, there was the FX suit of armor. People were starting to build their own armor.
Right.
And so there were some better options out there. And that's what kind of got me interested in like, oh, there's people out there building these things, like not fans, not a licensed replica. So, and so that was really interesting to me. And then, but anyway, I got this Don Post helmet, which was the same helmet that was on that statue they did. I don't know if you remember that in sharper image, which was a strange helmet because it was symmetrical. They'd halved it and cloned it. And so I got it. And I'm like, oh man, it's still not right. So then, but during this time, the company Icons came on. I don't know if you remember Icons.
Yeah, I remember Icons.
They were like the first guys sort of doing high-end replicas.
They were serious about it.
They were serious, and they were using real artists, that had worked in the industry. And I got a couple of things. I got their Terminator skull, the Endo skull, which there's a lot of those out there. And then I, at the time, my wife was working with Warner Brothers, and I got the Batarang from Batman and Robin, the Mr. Freeze one, which I wasn't in love with, but it was a cool metal Batarang. So I got a couple of their pieces, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. But by the time I was starting to really think about collecting more, they went out of business. And then they kind of famously went out of business. A lot of people lost money, and it was a whole kind of thing. So, but then on the heels of that was Master Replicas, which I think actually was they did some really great stuff. Not all of it, but it was really a cool, it got me excited about it. And at the time I was working at Blue Sky Studios with Fox, and I'd run into another guy who was a Star Wars fan. And so we were kind of, keeping each other going, I guess. So I was really into that, and I got, just a few pieces like the Elite Edition Han Solo blaster.
I had that.
Things that meant something to me, like the Luke saber from New Hope, things like that. And then of course they went out of business too. So I was kind of, I would look at the RPF on occasion, and I was kind of, into, keeping track of this stuff. Unfortunately with screen use, I think I got into it a little too late. And what I mean by that is the costs are just insane. And
that's for sure.
Like, 100,000 pounds for a Stormtrooper helmet. I don't know. I mean, it's just not, there was a piece that was just in the prop store that was a Ralph McQuarrie painting from Return of the Jedi of Vader on the flight deck of the Death Star. There's a couple of Imperial. That to me is like a piece that's worth it, because it's like, it's a one-off. It's a Ralph McQuarrie painting, know. And I'm not. This is just my own how I think about it. You know what I mean? I just think that I got in it too late, because you can't. If you're in it late, you can't do that swapping thing. You're like, oh, I spent this, but then I can get something. You know what I mean? It's just
exactly.
You're basically flat out.
It's a game of how much you have in your pocket, pretty much.
Yeah. But I will say, for me though, the additional thing that I got really interested in is working with artists and craftsmen such as yourself, and being part of the process. And to be honest with you, that's what I've found super, and that's what I've based my collection on. And I think even if, tabling the money for a second, the cost of screen used, that to me is how I'm starting to define my collection. And I actually love it. I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot, like when people are like, oh, this is this and this is that. And then I'm like, okay, then I start to take that information in. And I get to see it come to life, you know what I mean?
Right.
Much the way the original, in addition to you, Jason Eaton has built me several pieces, and you sort of, the way Jason works as an example, he's working the way the ILM guys worked, you know what I mean? And he's, as much as he can, sourcing, model kit parts. Yes, there are things that are 3D printed, but guess what? Any model maker today, if they were working, would be using 3D printers. So if something can't be found. So I've kind of, my collection is kind of steered in that direction. And I love it. I don't think, always look at the screen use auctions just to see, but it's not really where my interest lies anymore.
Right.
You know, it's just, this is, for me, in a weird way, more fulfilling.
That
Because
makes sense. I mean, there's a lot to just figuring out how to make something. There's that whole discovery process of, oh, this is how they did that. Or, oh,
right.
in fact, I was going through this the last few days. I've been building this thing. I don't know if this is coming across on the camera. Let me take this off.
Is it a Star Trek?
It's the
yeah.
the Boba Fett pre-production.
Oh, Boba Fett. It looks like a phaser.
The pre-production, yeah, it looks weird,
Yeah.
doesn't it? It's the pre-production blaster, and I discovered one of the parts, one of the greeblies that goes on it, because this camera shoulder stock thing came with a sync cable.
Right.
The very blurry pictures, and I just looked at it, and I was like, oh, that's what that is. It's the sync cable. It goes right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Discovered what the other one is too. So there's a kind of discovery about that's neat.
Yeah.
I found that some of the people who own some of the screen use props don't know much about what they have.
Right.
They didn't know what it is, that it was used and that it was in a scene, but then they can't answer some details about what it is, or what it's even made of, or something like that.
No, absolutely. And I used to do, before I went into, well, I was in New York, and there was a time I was going to move out to LA and try to break into special effects. So I kind of had and this is before Jurassic Park. In fact, I was very fortunate. I was in Stan Winston's shop before, and saw them building the dinosaurs out of clay.
Wow.
Before the decision had been made to go to CG.
Yeah.
So I was interested in that stuff, and a friend of mine had put me in touch with a buddy of his, and I was there, and I met some people there. Not Stan, but it was great. I mean, at the time, they were actually considering doing the Raptors as a full suit. So they had a guy that was going to be controlling the arms like this, and it was really cool. So I guess what I'm getting at is I had this kind of interest in doing this kind of physical, more practical scene work, prop work, because I'd been working as a scenic painter, interned 1 year and out of college. So anyway, I had that interest, as well. So that's why this method of collecting, again, working with people such as yourself, has been so fulfilling. I mean, I'm not building it myself. I used to build those vinyl model kits that are now, nobody makes them anymore, because you can just buy a statue at Sideshow. But, just to kind of scratch that itch of, building like, a monster or whatever. And when I was younger, I was doing a lot of that stuff. So anyway, and so that's the fun part of this for me.
Well, that's cool. But I remember seeing in your thing, so you did comic art as well, or you worked with comics? Can you tell me?
I was a comic book artist for Marvel and DC for a very short amount of time. That was really why I moved to New York. That's what I wanted to do. I moved down there, and it was very, very tough to break into the industry. So I became a graphic designer and working in advertising. I did a lot of logo stuff. I was on the team that did the Professional Bull Riders logo. In addition to the Los Angeles Rams, the ram that's on the shoulder. Yeah. So I did a lot of sporting stuff. And this is what I was doing while I was trying to break into comics. And so eventually I did some work with Marvel and DC as a penciler. And I had a title with Marvel called Starfleet Academy. It's actually based on Star Trek for about a year and a half.
That's cool.
And then unfortunately, what was happening in that time, the big thing I did was I pitched to DC a earthquake hitting Gotham in the Batman books, and they liked the idea so much they made it a huge crossover called Cataclysm that led into what was called No Man's Land. And in the 90s, they were doing all these big, this is mid 90s, big what do you call it, events with Batman. Yeah. Although some of the stuff in that No Man's Land you still see around, even in the Batman films, the Chris Nolan ones. Anyway, so that was kind of cool. That gave me an opportunity to write a few stories. But the problem was that at that time, it's hard to believe now, given the success of the Marvel movies, Marvel was in bankruptcy. The speculation market had collapsed. All the image guys had left, and there was this whole thing of like, here's a comic with a foil cover variant. We're going to print 1 million of them. Everyone's going to pay whatever and put them in plastic, and think they're going to pay, for their college kids' college education with it.
I fell for that.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, it's a Spider-Man with a hologram.
So that's right around when I was in comics, and and I was watching editors that I was working for were getting losing their jobs. It was a tough time, and so I started looking around. What am I going to do now? I was newly married, and I got lucky, and I got a job in television, kids television. There used to be a lot of it in New York, and there's still some, because of MTV animation like Beavis and Butthead, and also Sesame Street. And so I got an opportunity to work with some of the people at the Disney Channel and Jim Henson. And I was that was actually my introduction to digital artwork, because this producer was doing a show with puppets based on the Winnie the Pooh show. And I'm sorry, Winnie the Pooh characters. But they were in a virtual environment, and it was supposed to look like a pop-up book. And so that became, so that was sort of how I segued from comics into production. And I was really lucky. I mean, because, I was, not the greatest comic book artist by any stretch. So, making a living probably would have been tough to begin with. Right. But once it started really collapsing, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So right. that was how I, was lucky and was able to change my path.
Wow. And so how did you go from the early TV stuff to up and up and up and up to produce?
Well, it was a few things. I mailed my portfolio to Blue Sky, which was located, I was an East Coast guy. My whole professional career was spent in the New York area until I moved here to Paris. I never lived in California. And
so you were born and grew up New York area.
I was born in Maryland.
Maryland. Okay.
I lived all over the East Coast, but I'm originally from just outside of Baltimore.
Okay.
So so what happened was I could see this TV thing was like a lot of projects was coming to an end, and I needed to figure out what to do next. And so oh, that's my wife. You can let me just respond to that really quick. Where was I? I was at Blue Sky, right. So I was on the East Coast and was trying to stay on the East Coast. I'd just been married, my all that stuff, family stuff. And I had seen a presentation by this company called Blue Sky years ago at the Queens Museum of the Moving Image. They had done some effects for Alien Resurrection.
Yeah.
And as I told you, the aliens swimming underwater. And as I told you, I really had a lot of interest in special effects. And so the fact that was in White Plains, I was like, whoa, that was amazing to me. And they had done Ice Age at that point. So
oh, wow.
because they were there, I sent them my portfolio. I mailed it to them. And I got really lucky. About a year after I sent it to them, they called me in. They sent me a test. And I actually turned down some freelance work, and I did the test, did my best.
A test? What kind of test?
Like a test, like a storyboarding test.
Oh, really?
Oh, actually, yeah. It was like a one line. I was amazed because I was sort of thinking it was like, a high angle, character walks in a room, low angle, the feet across the floor, whatever, But it wasn't like that at all. It was basically said two characters are in a waiting room and they get into an argument, and that was it. And so you had to come up with something. So I came up with an idea, sent it to them. They called me in, and I got the job.
Wow.
From there, I started storyboarding on Robots and Ice Age 2, The Meltdown, the second film. And I got a lot of great opportunities working, particularly on Ice Age 2, pitching some story thoughts. I did a lot of the work on the Scrat character, which was obviously the star of those movies. But my big break came, I pitched an idea for a short featuring the Scrat, which they were going to do as a DVD extra. and it was called Scrat No Time for Nuts, and I think it's
I've seen it.
it's on the Ice Age 2 DVD, and I got the opportunity to direct that. So
Wow.
I basically wrote it, directed it, and then it got nominated for an Academy Award. So from
Cool.
there, I was able to the guy that was at Fox was leaving to form his own thing at Universal, and that's this guy Chris Renaud, super talented, smart producer. And I was like, man, I want to go with that guy, because I kind of figured a new company, as risky as it was, and that it would be a great opportunity for me to be able to direct a feature, because with these animation companies, it takes 2 to 3 years minimal to make a movie. There's not a lot of directing positions, so I figured that my chances would be better, trying something new.
That's a good gamble.
Yeah, it
Most of the
was.
time that doesn't pan out. I've been in that position a few times.
Yeah, no, you're right. And we had, on top of that, we had to move to France, and I had the terrific support of my wife, and my kids were very young. They were 3 and 5, so I had their support, but they didn't, they had no choice. So, and that was it. And that was, I've been here 12 years almost. So
wow, it doesn't seem like it's been that long since those movies came out, but
I know. Well, the first one came out in 10, but I moved here in 2008.
Golly, wow.
Yeah, so it's been 10 years since the first Despicable Me. Yeah.
Jeez, time flies. That's not.
I know.
That's crazy.
My son just turned 17 yesterday. I was like, holy moly! It's like, it's
yeah,
crazy.
mine's 9 now.
Yeah,
crazy.
it's gonna go before you know.
I've been married over 20 years, but I mean, he's not.
Yeah. We had our kids a little later too, but which was good, actually.
Yeah, wow, that's quite a story. How did I know you've been to the archives?
Yes.
How did that come about? Is it? I mean, obviously it comes from being in the industry, but
yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because one of my dreams obviously was to go to Skywalker Ranch. Like a lot of us, right?
yeah,
So,
I drove down Lucas Valley Road.
Yeah,
Exactly. I don't know.
Exactly. It's hard to find, by the way. So, what happened was, we were gonna do when we were coming time to post Despicable Me. I was like, gosh, I would love to do it at Skywalker. Just, I really didn't. Listen, they're the best in the business, by the way, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go to Skywalker. Yeah. But they really are the best. And so the woman I was working with, Janet Healy and Chris Meledandri, the 2 producers, Janet had worked up at ILM and with those guys for years before working with us, and then Chris, they had started doing mixing up there on the Fox films. So they were both like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Because we were trying to make Despicable Me for a lower budget. And so I was concerned, Skywalker is the premier place. Are they going to let us do it? But they worked it out. So we went up there. Now I'm thinking naively, right? I'm like, oh, great. I'm a director. I'm going to working on the ranch. I got the key to the archives. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I asked to go, and in my naivete, and they were like, yeah, okay, we'll see what we can do. I never heard a word. So that was strike one. So then I went up, I directed a film called The Lorax, based on the Dr. Seuss book. And again, did the post work up at Skywalker. I asked, hey, can I come to the archives? Love to go. Well, let's see what we can do. Strike 2. So then I get up there for Despicable Me 2. And by this point, thankfully, the characters in the Despicable Me world, and the Minions, obviously, especially, had really started to penetrate the culture.
Right.
And we got lucky. The people that were run the archives were fans of the film. And so when we asked for on Despicable Me 2, they granted us access, a guided tour. And so myself and a couple members of the crew, my crew, were able to go, and Pierre, also my directing partner, we were able to go to the archives. And they were great, and I stayed in touch with the woman that runs it, and she knows that I'm like a genuine fan. I mean, like when there's a touring show, whether it's Identities or Power of Costume, I'm there. I've been to New York and seen it. I've been to London. I've been to here in Paris, LA. So I saw the original Smithsonian Magic and Myth years and years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
which was before her time, I think. But most of the recent shows, so I've stayed in touch with her, and depending on the situation, usually when I go back, we meet up for lunch, and I'll stick my head in. So it's just one of those things. But I know that there are times that people ask, and a lot of times are refused, and we just got lucky. So.
Well, what is that process like once they say, okay, you can come? What is it like? Is it a tour, or they just go, okay, see you?
No, it isn't okay. See you. I think some people get that kind of access. I've been there by myself, since, and usually, she'll walk around me or somebody will. You know what I mean? And we'll, but if it's like a thing like, like I've been, I remember I mentioned that lightsaber to you. I've dueled with some lightsabers that are the tank antenna.
Yeah.
I've been locked in the cage that is, and from Temple of Doom.
Oh my God.
I've held the.
You need someone to like.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone about
I've held the Indy. The Han Hoth blaster, the one that we talked about, the MGC. So it's great, and I walk around and just sort of things that really interest me, which for me, obviously the original, which there's not many, the original Stormtrooper helmets from the first film. There's a ton of them from Return.
Right.
But from the original movies, there's just maybe 3 I've seen. There's not a lot. So I always love seeing those, though. Stuff from the first movie, there's not a whole bunch, but there is some. There is some.
That's pretty cool. I mean,
yeah.
Most people have no clue what it's actually like to go there. And I mean, is there a presentation feeling to it when you go, or is it literally just a stock room?
It's funny you mentioned that. I think it's really exciting in a lot of ways what they're doing with this Museum of Storytelling that's supposed to open in 22, because the truth is that, listen, it's a double-edged sword. I love the, the exclusive quality of going to the archives, because not everybody can go, and obviously
right.
the museum, However, I think it's the best thing for these important pieces in our culture, that they're properly preserved and displayed for a lot of people to enjoy. I really do. And I had an opportunity, I think right around my first visit of the archives, I also went to the Warner Brothers tour outside of London about Harry Potter. I don't know if you're familiar with that, which is amazing. I mean, it's so well curated. One difference is, a lot of stuff in Star Wars is plastic. And the problem with plastic is it doesn't age very well at all.
Great.
Whereas in Harry Potter, much like the Lord of the Rings films, they really try to build things with a, real wood, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of cheats, I guess. Not cheats, but it's just a different type of material. So, I had that real juxtaposition of like the storeroom feeling, which is kind of neat because you're like the little nooks and crannies and not everybody's allowed. And also this kind of really highly curated, well-preserved, beautiful display. And I couldn't help but feeling that, the Star Wars items would benefit from that. And of course, when you go to the traveling shows, they are like that.
They're
great. So I think I'm hoping this museum is great in its own right and really treats these objects with the respect they deserve.
I don't know enough about what that museum's construct is going to be. Is it just going to
I don't think anybody does. I think that, well, I'm sure people do, but I mean like the public. Yeah. I know that typically one of those shows, like Power of Costume, I think is about 10,000 square feet of display space. This museum has 100,000. So what they're even going to put in there will be interesting to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll be there.
I mean, George also has quite an art collection.
Yeah, he's got a lot of Norman Rockwell stuff.
Rockwell, all the famous illustrators, Maxfield Parrish, Howard Pyle. And so he's got N.C. Wyeth. He's got a pretty significant storytelling collection. I think that's part of what they're thinking is like, whether it's storyboards or famous illustrators, J.C. Leyendecker, the old magazine covers could be cool. It could be cool.
Is Skywalker Ranch littered with stuff like that, or is it a place of work?
it has a lot of that kind of stuff. There's old movie posters, and it's not as much as you'd think. When I first showed up, I figured R2D2 would be driving around, so but it's more about the history of film than the history of Star Wars. I think that's kind of how George is.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool. Wow. Well, that's an experience to have. That's
Yeah.
Well, so what other than Star Wars, are there any other like movies or anything else that you're into? I mean, I don't particularly just love Star Wars. I like all kinds of stuff, but
yeah, sure. No, I think probably one of the close seconds for me is Alien and Aliens. I love, to me, Aliens is the best sequel ever made because of how effortlessly it flows out of the first film, but it's its own great film. It's in its own right. And I like a lot of things, it's probably everything that's after that has had mixed success, as far as storytelling and all that sort of stuff. But I do love, there's a lot. I was just watched the original Alien again, and just, man, the way it's directed, the way it's put together, the way they're having that conversation, and it's almost like the camera, you're just so unaware of it. It's just, it's a really kind of amazing. So yeah, I love that. I love the character of Batman. I sort of fell in love with that, with Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. And when I was in high school when that came out, it was very pivotal. That was kind of like what nudged me. I had liked comic books, and I always loved drawing. That was my thing. But that kind of, I was like, ooh, you could do that with comics? That was really turned my head. I hate to say, it's funny because sometimes when I talk to people like kids, my sensibilities are definitely populist. I can't sit here and say, oh, it was a Truffaut film that influenced, the things that, I love are those big, like Star Wars, those big populist things that really, and to be honest, that's what I wanted to make and want to make. I'm not, I love it when, personally, I love it when people see the things that I've worked on and it meant something to them. I love that. I mean, I'm not.
Well, I can tell you, every time I see a full moon at night with my son, I say, Luke, it's the moon. I say it like Groot did every single time.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's one of those things you don't think that a simple line like that will stick with people, and it becomes part of their own family lexicon of language and stuff like that. It's pretty interesting how that happens. And things like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Aliens have become.
Oh, I love Raiders too. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's another. That's a great movie because it doesn't age. I think probably one of the genius things about it was setting it in the 30s. It's just. I don't know if you ever heard those tapes or seen the transcript of the meeting with, I think it's Lawrence Kasdan, Lucas, and Spielberg. And you see how much George first drove the meeting in a lot of ways, but how much of it was in his head. Like the costume ideas and like the bull, it's really kind of amazing to check it out. Because
I have that the Rinsler making of book. I haven't started reading it yet because I'm still finishing the third Star Wars one, but
yeah.
It's on my to-do list as far as sit down on the couch every night and read a few pages.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's really neat. It gives you real appreciation, I think, for Lucas. Because, a lot of people like, oh, they don't like this or they don't like that. But it does give you real appreciation for his talent as a creator, which is obviously significant. Even if you have quibbles with things in the prequels or whatever. It's
and he understands storytelling and how mythology affects culture and things like that. And that's key. That's something a lot of movies are missing.
Yeah.
But, and there are themes that go back 1,000 years that are, that repeat.
Right.
But going back to something you talked about, Aliens, is just a kind of a little side note. There's a collector here in Texas who has Vasquez's original smart gun.
Oh, really?
He brought it to the prop party, and I got to hold that and check that out. That was super cool. I need to send you a picture of that. It's pretty cool.
I've held one of the pulse rifles that it was in the first film, a hero one. So it had the Italian shotgun married to the Thompson. but it had been repainted for Alien 3. So it was black now. I think black and brown.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty amazing. Well, that's the funny thing. That was a piece that Icons was going to make. I don't know if you remember that. Right when they tanked, they were collecting, I think it was like a couple of grand. I don't exactly remember the number. And what they were purporting to do was make a hero version, because they'd made a stunt of the Alien Pulse Rifle using demilled gun parts, using and it was like, whoa, it just was like, wow, that's going to be awesome. And they collected, it was pyramid scheming, and then they went down right after that.
That's
the
closest I've been to anything aliens is when we at Blue Realm we did all that stuff for Hollywood Collectibles, the resin pulse rifles.
Right.
And
that was the one I mentioned to you. I have one of their old, which is okay, one of their hero versions of that rifle, which is very, I don't know. It's one of those things that it was. I like it, but it's. I wish a couple of things had been done a little.
I don't know. I know we made a certain number of them, and then I don't know if they were made before we got them, and I think they were made after. They did some and tried to do some in China or something like that.
But you made like a stunt version, right? I think
so.
Yeah, because this one actually has a working bolt.
Oh no, these were just solid pieces that were painted up and
even a clip that came out. But like certain things, like the springs were weak. The clip was resin, which is, if you're going to slam that clip in, it can't be resin.
Right. Right. Yeah, no. But they did want us to do the motion tracker thing.
Oh yeah.
So we had the Hero motion tracker, and we had all of the parts of the found parts that went into it, an extra one. So we were going to make
cool.
all that stuff, and I guess they just didn't want to pay what it was going to cost. So I think they wanted to go to China instead.
Yeah. I have a couple of their pieces from Alien, which I like. I think that it's the kind of thing, if you did a little tweaking, like a little painting yourself and just a little sweetening, but the basic thing is there. It's just probably a little bit of sweetening, as I say, would make it a little bit better.
That's cool. Well, I wanted to ask you about, so being a maker of animated films, obviously you don't have any physical props, but nothing to get from it. But being a digital creation, I guess any toy could be pretty much accurate, right?
Well, that's true. I mean, like you can see behind me, this is a resin cast of Gru and Lucy, and that's right off the 3D file. So we can do like this. In this case, I believe it was printed, a mold was made, and then they pulled casts from a mold, versus this being an actual 3D print, which is pretty typical when you're doing more than like whatever 2 or 3 versions. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. One thing I wanted to show, and this was one of the things that got me kind of interested in, having people build things, is this is Norman, my character from Secret Life of Pets, and I had some guys from the one of the shops that does puppets for Henson.
Uh-huh.
I sent him a 3D file, and he was able to make character. Yeah, just to make a version of the character as a puppet.
That's so fun.
Yeah, and it was kind of an eye-opening experience, because I was like, oh, that's cool that, you can talk to talented people and say, because you never think of that. You're like, well, nobody made the Norman character, so that's it, Yeah. But there are people, particularly, obviously it's a changed world, like things like Etsy and that, there are people out there that are doing this stuff. I mean, even the level of machining that you and Field Marshal are doing, is pretty sophisticated. I mean, so, people are out there doing that stuff. And when you have the connections, happening, pretty much the sky's the limit.
Pretty much where there's a will, there's a way, I guess.
Yeah.
So part of the production process for your movies, do you make maquettes of things so people can kind of look at it in 3-dimensional space?
We don't anymore. I think that probably if you talk to some of the other studios that have longer production times, bigger budgets, they still do that. But to be honest with you, that's really a luxury that you don't need, because if you think about it, we used to. When I was at Fox, and actually even in those days, people were sculpting in clay, and then they would do a 3D scan. The problem is with that technology, particularly back then, you have to clean it up so much, it's hardly worth doing. So, and the sculpting tools in the computer, particularly a program called ZBrush, are great. And so, once it's in the computer, there's really no point in, it's just a step you don't need, as I say. You know what I mean? It's nice, it's beautiful. And if I'm being honest, I wish we did more of it, more just to have stuff to put in a display case.
Right.
But for production, you just don't need it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Tell me, this is just a personal curiosity. I want to know more about the voices of the Minions, because I think we talked about it off this discussion. But it sounds, I hear lots of languages in there.
Yes.
I hear Thai. I've heard Spanish. I've heard French. Different things. And I know you do a voice as well for that.
I did Minions on the first 2 movies, and then now it's pretty much Pierre. And a lot of that, like what I would do when I was doing storyboards and putting the movie together in its initial, when we make an animated movie, we start with a what's called a story reel, which is basically a sketch of the film before we go to animation. So certain things I would do, I did the Minion singing a lullaby, or the Minion saying, Bidoo on his the horn that he's running around. And as I said, in the beginning, the Minions didn't talk very much. So when I was doing storyboard as a director, I would throw in a voice here and there. You know what I mean? I'd say, oh, we need a lullaby, and literally like last minute throw it in, and then get the scene approved and move it forward. And then I did not direct Minions or Despicable Me 3. So I really wasn't doing, and again, the Minions needed to talk more. And a lot of that stuff, particularly with the languages, is Pierre. So, as they needed to talk more, he was directing the film, so he kind of took it and ran with it. But again, in the early days, I remember one of the more, I guess, famous ones I did was a Minion going, "What?" And I just threw that in over, it was a cut to reaction shot. It was just empty. So I literally just threw it in before presenting the scene. And then we kept that in, and, T-shirts later, what I mean? Still, so because I'm not making them actively at the moment, as the director, I've been, producer on those last 2 films. Pierre's been doing the voices, and he did a lot of it even in the beginning, because he's got this great laugh. One thing I couldn't do, I did a lot of the voices for the evil Minions in Despicable Me 2, but he's got this great charming laugh that I could not approximate. And so we used my laugh for the bad guys.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you, because you mentioned it. Let me turn this background off, because here's your.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be a while until you can.
I know, right?
See it. Here's your Bosk blaster.
Nice. I'm glad we got those the proper scopes.
Oh yeah, it makes a huge difference.
It kind of does. I hate to say it.
I mean, the resin one I have, I'm gonna eventually just, if I can't get one of these, I'm just gonna put some real scopes on that. And,
yeah.
One thing was cool is you can't really appreciate it until you get it, but they line up. They scopes line up.
You're kidding. Oh, that's awesome.
One
I
magnified.
noticed in the photo, is there initials carved in the stock on the other side? Flip it over. Is there a J?
Well, on this here, let me see if I can get it up close. There is a.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's what I saw.
A JP2. I don't know what that could be a unit number. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's it. I think a bunch of them had that. There's a bunch of proof marks from Webley and Shermully here. Serial number. Not much to it really, but I've got it here. So pretty much you can sight down it, and you can look through, and one crosshair magnifies the other one. So you can.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you can actually put the crosshairs on something when you look through it. It's kind of neat.
That's so great.
But yeah, it's a cool object for sure. It's not too heavy because it's mostly aluminum, but it's still got a pretty good weight to it, and the trigger works. So
that's great.
And of course, Manny is working on the metal versions of the front.
Of the tip.
I don't know if he hasn't. I think those are out being machined now, so we'll see soon what that looks like. But I did get some better pictures of the original. In fact, I wanted to let me see if I can screen share, and I'll show that to you real quick before we stop. Tell me if you can see this.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so.
Let me get my glasses. Oh yeah. Oh wow. Oh yeah.
A little bit better than what we had before.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me move this thing out of the way. Let's see.
That's so funny, right? You look at Boston, you're like, how does that guy shoot a gun?
Exactly. So yeah, there's not much. It's just it's kind of a silly setup. You know, that's the way that sling is and everything. But you can see here that the tip. It looks kind of pretty close to what.
Yeah. No, it looks great. Very accurate to what you have.
So anyway, those are new discoveries courtesy of Art Andrews. I was asking him about it, and he said, "Oh, I got some better pictures than that." Because all
of Boston's mask too, actually.
Yeah,
that mask is in Jason Joyner's collection. The guy who took over the stuff from Gary Kurtz.
Oh, wow! Whoops. Yeah. So, well, I want to thank you so much for your time. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know it's in the evening now. And
no, it's been a pleasure. It's been fun.
Yeah, we'll do it again next sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll focus on something in particular if we can talk about it. And
yeah, no, that'd be great. Now, this was a lot of fun, Scott. I appreciate it. I could talk about this stuff all day.
Well, so can I, but it is evening. And
I know. I already got one text from my wife, so I got to get back.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for your time, and hope I'll edit this and you'll see it before everybody else does. But
great.
Hopefully some people get some enjoyment out of this.
Great. Nice to chat, Scott.
All right, you too. Take it easy.
Take it easy. Bye-bye. Working in Australia doing an actual puppet version. Like, in other words, doing it like Tom Saint-Amand armature.
Posable and everything?
Machined, yeah.
That's cool. So, yeah, I saw that there was people on the RPF doing that, and I keep seeing it in the Facebook group, but I can't remember who actually is doing that.
I only know him. I think his last name is Bosniak. He's in Australia, Rob Bosniak. He's done some stuff for Jason, like some aluminum cores for blockade runners, stuff like that Jason's working on now. It's pretty cool. I mean, the legs are, look spot on. I mean, it's hard to tell because there's no reference, scale wise, but
I got some pretty good reference of those, the machine pieces.
Yes, and so does he's got all that stuff. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Are we recording now? Or we're already recording?
I'm recording, but I can edit. I can edit.
No, sure. I have the MR. I don't have the signature. I got that one kind of late. I got the regular one is. And I got it secondhand on eBay a few years ago now, actually. It's funny.
Yeah, same with this one. I got it on eBay. It was listed fairly cheap at the time because it had one of the little pistons for the ankle.
Right.
It was broken off, but apparently this is the one that Master Replicas had at their San Diego Comic-Con booth when they were showing it off. So it came from them directly, I guess, somehow.
Right.
And I was here.
Yeah, it's a great piece. And is that the EFX TIE Fighter?
Yeah, the EFX TIE Fighter.
Yeah, that's a great one too.
Yeah.
I don't have that here. I have that back in the States.
But I had to machine my own base for it because their base is huge and square and wouldn't fit on that shelf. So I got a big old piece of aluminum and turned it, and then I got some laser cut acrylic to go around it and made
that's cool to make a smaller base. That's a smart idea. Yeah, because that base is big. Yeah.
It's real big.
The base on their EFX, I use it for one of my custom jobs, but for their EFX, the Vader helmets is also gigantic.
Yeah, it's huge. It's good if you want to get like a cover, a top for it.
Yeah.
But this pretty dust free here, so.
Yeah. It's funny because I haven't been in my office for 2 months basically because of the lockdown. So I've been working, dusting and cleaning because everything here is pretty much open. I don't have, but I mean the windows are sealed and I've got UV film and stuff like that. But but I do have to dust it. It takes a few days.
Yeah, no, I mean it gets dusty, but for some reason that shelf, I don't know what the deal is. The higher up shelves don't get a lot of dust. It's everything from about shoulder height down.
Right.
Dusty for my desk, maybe because of paper.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
For sure.
But, yeah, it's weird. But yeah, so that's that stuff, and then there's a RS props Luke helmet and an EFX wedge, and I won that in the raffle at the North Texas prop party. So
that's cool.
That's the coolest thing I've ever won. I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll take that. And then I have a car obsession too, so that's what you see down there. And then there's a detention block camera set up from all real Tridents.
Oh yeah.
And then just some random stuff like there's a Mal pistol from Firefly,
right?
Blade blaster, my Blade Runner blaster, Jurassic Park cryo can with the embryos in it.
Oh, who was that? An RPF thing?
Yeah, that was an RPF thing. It's pretty cool. So Goonies, I have the Goonies copper bones and the doubloon and the map. What else is over there? The potions book from Harry Potter. It's got like every single page.
That's cool.
Pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, just some random stuff right over there. And then in my front room is where I have some of the like display pieces. But
right, I've seen that. I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah,
the showcase.
Yeah, but there's sabers and blasters here too, and just like toys and stuff, and have stuff laying around.
Yeah, I was thinking of I saw that. I was thinking what because I'm sort of split. My collection is here, and then some of it is in the States. But we spend most of our time here in France. And I want to, of course, like everybody, I guess, want to do a room one day and really have it some dedicated space. And I was thinking it would be cool if, a lot of the blasters you've done for me to almost do like that weapon rack that the Mandalorian has in his ship.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, my own ones, the only one I have, two of them, well, three of them up on stand, four of them up on stands, and then this Return of the Jedi one just kind of sitting on my desk. But the real ones have to be in a safe.
Yeah. That's kind of the nice thing about the ones that Field Marshal made, actually, is that they're so accurate, but there's no legal issues.
There's no legal. You don't have to worry about somebody picking it up or stealing it and doing something with it. I mean, even if someone stole it, it's just a prop. So
yeah, that's cool, actually.
Yeah, but so
I keep the one that you made for me under my desk, just like Han Solo. I actually got it. I don't have the belt assembled, but I've got it in this great. This guy, I don't know if you know him, a guy named Matt Poitras, MPP Filmcraft. He did a lot of leather.
I've heard of it.
I saw a guy in at Celebration Europe dressed as Han Solo. He had kind of a funny costume, like it was Han Solo on the Tauntaun, So it was almost like I don't know if your kids, like if you have a daughter, like running around on a unicorn, you know what I mean? So it was like
so his
legs of the Tauntaun, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, he had this great belt, and it was this guy, MPP Filmcraft, Matt, and he did a lot of them for Disney. So I had him do this, and I had him do the Luke Besman belt too.
Oh, cool.
I have the other one, and so those are the two that I've got here in France. But it's pretty nice quality.
Yeah, I used to have a Todd's one, and I used it. I took it to the range and used it, and we used it on that TV shoot and stuff, and it worked out pretty well. The only thing that I didn't like about it was that the clip for the Kobold wasn't steel; it was aluminum, so it wouldn't hold anything really. It just would bend and not hold. But the rest of it was great. Yeah, I think he's since fixed that, but it fit the real guns, it fit the prop guns, it fit everything. So it was
this one's pretty nice. I had an Anovos belt, which was also pretty good. Actually, in some things I liked about the Anovos better than this one. But it was too big. So I gave it to a friend of mine who's like 6'3".
Oh wow! Yeah, I sold mine because it was just literally hanging on a door for years and
Yeah.
unused. So it was pointless. But it would be cool. I think it would be cool. I have a friend who's doing one of a Luke belt from the New Hope,
Yeah.
and with all the pouches and everything. And I was thinking about it would be a pretty cool display where it was up on the wall. You could put the lightsaber on it. You could put the binoculars on it, and the cobalt, and they could come off if you wanted to mess with them.
Yeah.
But it'd just be hard mounted up on the wall. That'd be pretty.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be cool. This guy Matt, his site is down now, I think, but he actually does that belt. He does pretty much every belt, Obi-Wan from up through the films, even the prequel stuff, up through Force Awakens anyway. But I haven't seen him. His site's been down for, I don't know, a few months now.
Huh? Is he out of Texas?
I think so.
I want to say Austin or something like that.
I think so. And he did other stuff too. He did like medieval, like more generic stuff, like Roman centurion armor, that kind of stuff. He's a really talented guy.
That's cool. Yeah, leather work is tough.
Yeah, particularly at this gauge. You know what I mean? It's not
thick.
When I was I should save this for the interview. Well, this could be the interview. When I was a kid, I had the Kenner solo blaster, right?
Yeah, so did I.
And so I remember I tried to make a holster with fabric, right? And of course I couldn't sew, so I stapled it to try to get it. Didn't work. Even that light plastic gun, it couldn't, the staples would come out. All those early efforts when you're a kid.
Yeah, I had that one, but I think I had the Star Wars version too.
Yeah.
It just goes if
I remember right. I had. Yeah. That's what I had. Yeah, it was a little probably a little rotor in there, actually.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's the same sound that the X-Wing and the Y-Wing made.
Yes, similar. I think the X-Wing might have been electronic, actually, believe it or not. I'm not sure. But the gun definitely was a rotor.
Yeah, the only toy I have from the childhood days is the B-Wing. And it's hanging up in my son's room.
Do you have any of the figures from when you were a kid?
None of the ones, the actual ones that I had, those were all gone. I grew up and wanted a bike, so I put them in a garage sale.
Yeah, fair enough.
My mom said, put them as a quarter a piece, and they sold just like one guy took them all. But,
right.
But they were played with.
Yes.
And even some of the Lukes had the hands cut off.
Yes.
After Empire Strikes Back, I took some scissors. I was like, it had to be real.
That's great.
But yeah, so no, I don't have any of that stuff left. The B-Wing survives just because.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish.
It was at my grandmother's house, and my cousins ended up playing with it. And
I gave my whole collection to my cousin, who was about 10 years younger. I was born in '66, so I was older. I was in high school actually, and I gave all the play sets in the ships and everything to my cousin, who was about 10 years younger than I was at the time. So I guess he was probably 6 or 7. And of course they all got demolished, but I did keep the figures. And again, they're in the US somewhere. I had that Darth Vader carrying case, and I do have some of those. I painted an extra C-3PO silver, so it'd be like that guy in the blockade runner at the very beginning of Star Wars, stuff like that. So I do have those somewhere. Although the funny thing is, as I'm sure you know, plastic does not age well. And, even some of the Hot Toys, as new as they are, they start to get that tackiness, and the plastic starts to break down. So God knows. And it's funny, it's very unpredictable. You know what I mean? Some toys do it and some don't. And so I don't know what shape they'll be in when I see them next.
That's true. You never know. I've recollected some of the vintage figures, just, and I got the best ones I could get and just put them in a case.
Yeah.
And someone gave my wife a little thing of figures for my son.
Right.
And it had a Luke in it.
Right.
It had a blue snaggletooth as well.
Oh yeah, I had that. I still have it. I had that from the Sears set, actually. That's how old I am.
That's cool. I mean, I didn't have that Sears set. In fact, I don't think I only originally had the red snaggletooth. I don't think I had any really rare in particular. I never had a vinyl Cape Jawa. I just had the cloth.
No, I never. But I will say, I do really distinctly remember the search for that figure because, whatever it was, the initial 12, they released them all, and Jawa was the only one. You could not find it. You just could not find it. And of course, when I was a kid, they finally released the cloth cape Jawa, which I was thrilled that it came out at all. And I actually thought it was like, oh, this looks better.
Yeah, it looks better.
Yeah, and I got a couple of them, and but I really remember trying to complete my collection, finding a Jawa, and just never got lucky like that.
Yeah, the only time I remember very specifically searching for a figure and knowing something was up was Return of the Jedi, the Luke. So I went and saw the movie in the theater opening day, and then when I went to the store to look for it, all they had was Luke's with blue lightsabers. And I remember going through them. I was like, oh, why are they all blue? There should be a green one. And I found a green one, and then I went home with the green one. And now, I wish I had the one with the blue one, but
and kept him on the card.
Yeah. So now I have one in a bag here.
Oh, there you go.
That's never been opened. But the silly things, little plastic junk that ends up costing lots of money later.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, let's get into it.
All right.
I'll edit this and we'll put it at the end with
sure.
supplemental stuff here, so I don't distract everybody. So I'll do a little intro, and then I guess we'll just go from there.
Yep, you got it.